Hello, language learners. When a lot of beginner language learners decide on which languages they want to learn, a lot of them go to which ones are easiest, which is fine. It's fair. It makes sense. You know, if you don't have any experience with learning languages, you don't necessarily want to go from English to Japanese like that. I get it. Nothing wrong with it. And I know that there are tons and tons of videos and blog posts and articles all saying, you know, which languages are easiest for specifically native English speakers to learn. But one thing that I never see anybody talk about is why these languages are easier for native English speakers to learn. Because it's a very logical reason, and when you understand the reasoning behind it, then it makes it a lot easier to make those decisions for yourself without having to, you know, go through a really obsessive Google search trying to find out which languages have like similar grammar structures or similar vocabulary or whatever. I'm all about being educated and making my own decisions for stuff like this, and not necessarily looking to a stranger on the internet to tell me their subjective opinion about this kind of stuff. So I wanted to share this information with you so that it might help you make a more educated decision about which languages you might be interested in learning, as well as clue you into some related languages that you'd be really surprised. You would be really surprised which languages are related and which languages have similar patterns, because I'm surprised all the time. And then I think about this video, what I'm talking about in this video. Yes, I'm talking about language families. And it all makes sense. I'm like, why did I not know this before? Obviously, they come from the same language family. Obviously, they're going to be similar. So language families. If you don't know what a language family is, it's kind of basically the history of the language developing. You know, there are people in this world who are much more familiar with specific language families and whatnot. But if you've ever heard the term Romance language, for example, Romance languages are the Spanish, the French, the Italian. Those are the big three that everybody knows of. And those are generally understood as the easiest languages to learn. And the reason why they are easy for native English speakers to learn is because of the language family, the Romance language family. Honestly, language families are like a really fascinating topic that I don't know much about. It really goes into the history of languages, like linguistic history. Fascinating topic that I don't know enough specifically about to talk about. However, when it comes to which languages that you might want to be learning because they're a little bit more easy, mixed with the concept of language families, what you need to be thinking about is two things. You need to think about your native language and any language that you have any experience with whatsoever. And this includes high school classes, college classes, where even if you feel like you didn't learn anything and you can't speak, you have no ability to speak the language whatsoever, I feel like some people might be surprised at how much they understand about a language's patterns and structures. So for example, you know, a lot of people think that Spanish and French and Italian, the Romance languages, are very easy for native English speakers. And it's true, you know, they are easy for native English speakers, but keep in mind that English is not a Romance language. English is a Germanic language. So while there's a lot of history between, you know, English and Spanish, for example, and so there's a lot of words that are similar, like sofa, el sofá, they're literally the same word. While there are a lot of similarities, they're not in the same language families. English is a Germanic language, Spanish is a Romance language. However, one of the big reasons, besides the, you know, words that are exactly the same in both languages, just with like an extra letter or like a different accent or something like that, a big reason why a lot of native English speakers learn Spanish so easily is because we learn Spanish in school. So even, like I said, even if we don't actually learn to speak Spanish in school because we don't practice speaking, we practice getting tested on different conjugations and vocabulary, that still counts as experience. That still gives you knowledge that even if you don't activate it by having conversations, this is knowledge that is in your mind. And when you start learning Spanish, for example, you will pick up these patterns more easily because you already have that information in your brain. You just gotta activate it. So based off that example of, you know, basing not only our native language, but any language that we have any experience with as a, you know, base to bounce our language family search off of, what kind of connections can we expect to see with language families? So like I said, I'm going to use the familiar concept of the Romance languages. So that's Spanish, French, Italian. There's some other ones there as well, but I'm going to stick to those three because that's what I've got on the top of my head, honestly, and they're the popular ones. For one, alphabets. Different languages have different alphabets. Not everybody has the same alphabet that we do in English. In Spanish they do, yes. In French and Italian, tons of other Germanic languages, they have the same alphabet. Following the families of the languages that you already understand or already have some experience with, that'll really put you ahead of the crowd, because you don't have to learn a whole new alphabet, which is difficult. And yes, you can always find romanizations of alphabets, which is basically a non-Roman alphabet that is like Romanized. Basically, they sound out the sounds of the non-Roman letters and they make it into Roman letters, so it makes it easier for us. However, if you're gonna learn a language that has a different alphabet, you should really learn the alphabet. I mean, you should. Just like out of respect for the language, and also to get more of an understanding of the culture and, you know, get closer to language and understand it better. So yes, alphabets are a big one. As native English speakers, if we don't ever try and learn Chinese, Japanese, Korean, or like Semitic languages, then we never have to try to learn a new alphabet, and it makes it a lot easier for us. What else is there? Grammar. Grammar is the second point that I'm going to make about language families. Grammar is basically the structure of sentences, how we put words together in sentences, whether or not we start with the subject, verb, objects, prepositions. I can't even think of the other words to describe those words to describe words. But that's, as an example, one reason why it's very difficult to learn Asian languages, because we start out with subject, verb. I don't actually know the textbook like order of sentences, but in Asian languages it is not like that, and in non-Asian languages as well. In other Germanic languages, the sentence structure gets weird. If you have, you know, above and ultimate beginner experience of Spanish or French, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So like, for example, in English we would say the green sofa. In Spanish and French they say the sofa green. I mean, that's a really, really simple example, but it gets the point across. So when you go down the line of language families between languages, it's so much easier. So for example, if you figure out Spanish grammar, French grammar is not that far off. There are some differences, sure, but it's very, very similar, and it's very easy to use the information that you have in your brain for Spanish and apply it to French. Just borrow that information, spread it across another language. You don't have to learn an entirely new grammar structure. You don't have to learn an entirely different way of speaking, of communicating. And much like grammar is very similar across languages, so is vocabulary. And, you know, I already said, you know, the example of sofa and el sofá in English and Spanish, they're very similar. And that's something that we take for granted in school, or as beginners, as kids, when we learn, you know, basic Spanish or French or whatever language in school. That's something that we take advantage of. But this video is actually inspired, that I'm going to talk about it now. This video is inspired actually by my recent endeavor into Yiddish. So I've talked about a couple of times now. I'm exploring Yiddish a little bit, and it's so fascinating because Yiddish has a different alphabet, which is really fun. I had to learn a whole entire new alphabet for Yiddish. But what's even more interesting is how similar the vocab and the grammar is, because what I didn't realize, Yiddish is a Germanic language. English is a Germanic language. English and Yiddish are in the same family tree. So for example, while in English I might say, this is my mother, in Yiddish, it's literally the same exact thing. But it's the words are the same. You say it in the same, this is my mother. You don't say like, my mother this is, or is mother my this. Which you'll have in non-Germanic or Romance languages. So the vocabulary is almost exactly the same. The grammar, so far, don't quote me on this. Like I said, I'm literally just on like the beginner parts of Duolingo Yiddish. So don't quote me on it. But what's also really fun is, you know, it's easy to forget, at least for me it is, that because English is a Germanic language, it's also similar to German. So in Yiddish, you say, ich bin for I am, which is the same thing in German. And it really connects those languages, which makes it really easy to not only learn multiple languages that, again, follow the same family tree, it also allows you to see the history of these languages and where they came from and how they borrowed words and phrases and grammar structures. They're all interconnected in ways that are really surprising sometimes. It's a really fun thing to find out. It's really fun to find out how similar languages are that seem like they should be so different, but alas, they are not. Yiddish is so unbelievably close to English that I'm honestly blown away. And yeah. And that is why when you look up videos on which languages are most easiest to learn for native English speakers, that's why they're following language families. They're following the history of languages and how they developed together and which languages borrowed which words, which grammar structures from other languages. Those borrowed rules and vocabulary words and phrases and pronunciations, those make it so much easier to grasp the concept of a new language, because you can base this new knowledge off of old knowledge that you have from your native language. It makes it a lot easier for your brain to make sense of it. That is all I have for this video. In the comment section below, let me know, do you follow language families at all when it comes to picking which languages to learn? Is that something that, you know, really excites you to learn more about language families, or do you just not care and you just kind of go for most common languages, which is totally fair. I mean, I definitely am guilty of that myself, so no judgment here. Otherwise, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when I post a new video every Wednesday and Sunday. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.